to Kansas. What do you make of this? Because Norlander and I have talked about this all season. I've talked about it infrequently or less frequently with you. It would be one thing if Kansas was just bad all year and like disappointing all year. Kansas started, I don't even know if people remember this, started 7-0 with wins over the outright Big Ten champ, Michigan State, outright ACC champ, Duke. Duke is now the favorite to win this tournament. KU beat them by 2 on a neutral court early. At the time, it looked like, okay, 7-0, preseason number 1, wins over Duke, Michigan State. I guess they are exactly what we thought they'd be. And since that happened, the 7-0 start, they are 14-13 the rest of the way. And only won more than 2 games in a row after that 7-0 start, once more the entire season. That's a long way to get to the question, but the question is, do you have a sense for what happened? How did this team go from looks good on paper, wow, looks good on the court, and the rest of the way after 7-0 is basically 500?
Yeah, no, I don't really have a good explanation, because the question I saw posed tonight by some folks was like, well, where's Kansas's NIL budget? Like, because that's the default, right? When things don't go well these days, everybody wants to say, well, maybe their NIL is not up to par. I don't think that's the case for Kansas. Yeah. If you look at the roster that Bill Self assembled, it's a talented roster. You got Hunter Dickinson, a high-dollar player. You got A.J. Storr, a high-dollar transfer. Riley Griffin was a highly rated transfer. Zeke Mayo was as well. Not to mention you were able to retain DeJuan Harris and KJ Adams. So talent was not the problem. Right. Offense was the problem. That's the simplest explanation. But for all the people out there who want to bury Bill Self, consider this. Roy Williams went 3 years from 98 to 2000 without escaping the first weekend of the NCAA tournament at Kansas. What did he do after that? He went Sweet 16, Final Four, national title game, and then he went to North Carolina. So what were Kansas fans saying in 2000 when they got eliminated in the second round, right? Because if we're going to say that Bill Self is done, I think you're ignoring the history here, which is that it's Kansas. You can get this thing turned around. I mean, Bill Self is a Hall of Fame coach, a national title winning coach. I don't bury Kansas based off of what happened tonight. Tonight was just the continuation of what we've seen for the last 2.5 months. What went wrong? I think it was just a lack of offense, a lack of shot creation. Because I thought the zone was a creative wrinkle that Bill Self got in his bag and threw something at him that was not on tape. 7 possessions all season, and it worked, but they just couldn't score. And then KJ Adams also got hurt in that stretch. And I know Kansas fans all season have been picking on KJ Adams a little bit, but when he leaves the game changes, right? Because without him on the floor, they really couldn't do anything. And so tonight, at least, his absence, I think, is largely what hurt them.
Now, KU has lost 24 games the past 2 seasons, and those are the 2 seasons with Hunter Dickinson. 11 losses last season, 13 losses this season. Do you connect those dots at all? I know Hunter Dickinson has been an All-American caliber player. He's posted big numbers. He's obviously one of the faces of the sport, but it's hard not to notice because this is just a fact, and we can then debate or discuss whether you can attach it to the things people are attaching it to. But Hunter Dickinson showed up at Kansas. Bill Self had just been basically running through the Big 12 year after year after year, and the worst 2 years he's ever had as KU's coach happened to be the past 2 years, happened to be when Hunter Dickinson was the centerpiece of everything. I know people on social media connect those dots. Do you?
Well, he's our coworker, first off, Gary.
No.
Regular guest on CBS Sports HQ. Does a great job with that.
Oh, he might be at CBS Sports Network this weekend. So listen, I'm just speaking factually. There's no emotion here. I'm just Bill Self's worst 2 years as KU's coach are the past 2 years, and those are the 2 years where Hunter Dickinson was his best player.
Well, if you surround him with better shooting, if you surround him with better shot creation, then maybe it's a totally different conversation. So sure. If you need Hunter Dickinson to literally do everything for you, then yeah, that's a problem. And it felt like for stretches of this season, that was it. I mean, there was a quote from Bill Self not too long ago about we got to feed Hunter, ride Hunter here down the stretch. If everybody knows that that's what you're going to do, then you're telegraphing your style of play, and you're overly reliant on an antiquated style of basketball when you're trying to play through the post and you don't have the perimeter shooting to keep the pressure off a guy like that. So, I mean, what do you think? Do you think the blame lies on Hunter Dickinson's shoulders?
I think some of it does. I don't think it's all him. I think when a team goes from 7-0, ranked number 1 in the country, to 14-13 the rest of the way, you're not going to put that on one guy. I do think he's a statistical monster who maybe doesn't impact winning as much as you would like a statistical monster to impact winning. But no, to answer your question more directly, I don't think you can pin all this on him. I don't think that's his legacy. I think the truth is, and I always am aware of what it sounds like when somebody like you and I are sitting here being like, well, the thing Bill Self ought to do, like, he's a Hall of Fame coach with multiple national championships, and we're podcasting. Like, that's never lost on me. But they do not play a modern style of basketball. You know, even in this game, they took 17 threes, and the overwhelming majority of shots came from inside the arc. That's just not the way people play basketball anymore, at least not people who pay attention to the analytics. So I just think all of this is new. And when you've been doing something a certain way and it's worked so long, it can be difficult to change it, or you don't even really understand why you should consider changing it. Like, if it works this way, might as well keep doing it this way. But it hadn't worked the past 2 years, whatever. I do think in a different era, you would just go out and recruit talented players that fit what it is you were looking for. And then you'd figure out how to piece them together, sometimes over multiple years. I can remember talking to Ben Howland a million years ago, and it was like, you're losing this guy. Who replaces him? He was like, Russell Westbrook, because Russell Westbrook's on my bench. And I knew Russell Westbrook wasn't going to be a primary player for me early, but now that this other NBA guard is gone, Russell Westbrook will just slide into there. You could just sort of plan years in advance about what your teams might look like. Well, if you are thinking anywhere past next November, right now, you're looking too far ahead. So I think maybe there's a way to better figure out exactly how these pieces I'm getting out of the transfer portal fit together in November. Like, let's really talk about it. I know John Shire emphasized that with Duke's roster. We have Cooper Flagg. Now, how do we put the best possible players, not just around him, but the best possible players that fit well around him. Maybe there's some more thought into that. Ultimately, I think Kansas will be fine. Ultimately, I think Bill will be fine. But I do think it's probably time to, take a look at some stuff, because these past 2 years have both been wildly unusual.
Well,
Enough about that. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Cal and Arkansas figured it out, because Nelly Davis and Jonas Adu, they were high on my list of transfer busts 6 weeks ago. And here they both are. I mean, Jonas Adu was playing 6 minutes a game for a stretch there. Now all of a sudden Big Z can't get off the bench because Adu's just feasting. So even if the pieces don't fit in November or December, you can still figure out a way in February and March, which is what Arkansas has done. So that's what blew my mind. This was like the transfer bust all-star game when you got AJ Storr and Nelly Davis and Jonas Adu all out there playing well tonight. I actually thought it made the game a better game, the fact that those guys were at or near their best.
So now on Saturday, we will get Arkansas against St. John's.